They say the way to a man's heart is through his stomach, but I learned the hard way that sometimes what feeds him is meant to end him. I'm Evelyn, and I have lived long enough to know when a kitchen feels wrong. Sometimes it's the smell. Sometimes it's a sound. But in that house, it was the silence. That morning started like any other, the stove humming, the spoons ticking against ceramic, the clock dragging its way toward 8. But something in my chest tightened the moment I stepped in. I saw Jolene at the counter, stirring 2 bowls that were meant to look identical. Same color, same glow, same steam rising. Except one of them gave me a feeling I still can't forget. A feeling that whispered, Silas shouldn't touch that. Not today. Not ever. You ever walk into a room and feel something is off, even when everything looks normal? That was me in Silas's kitchen. Nothing dramatic. No mess. No arguments. Just a quiet house, too quiet for a place where a marriage was supposed to feel warm. Attention is easy to grab when something loud happens, but the truth is, danger loves silence. I watched Jolene move around that kitchen with the kind of smile people practice in mirrors. A smile that never reached her eyes. A smile that told me she wasn't serving breakfast, she was serving control. And here's where it gets personal. If you've ever ignored your instincts because you didn't want to seem rude, or paranoid, or dramatic, then you understand the feeling that held my stomach that day. It wasn't fear. It wasn't panic. It was the quiet warning a mother gets when her child is in danger, even if the danger is wearing perfume and pretending to be helpful. I didn't know the full truth yet, but I knew this much: those bowls weren't the same. Not even close. Silas didn't see it, not the tension, not the odd stillness, because tired men rarely notice the things that matter most. He walked into the kitchen rubbing the back of his neck, yawning like he hadn't slept in weeks. Jolene rushed toward him with that bowl like she was offering him a gift, not a routine. That's when the questions started forming in my mind. Why was she so focused on making sure he ate every single spoonful? Why did she stare at him, not lovingly, but carefully? Why did she always keep her own breakfasts so different, so separate, as if they were living 2 different mornings under the same roof? Have you ever watched someone you care about drift into a version of themselves that doesn't feel right? You see the tired eyes, the missing energy, the fading joy, but every time you ask what's wrong, they blame work, stress, age, anything but the real problem. I kept those questions to myself. I didn't want to start a war I wasn't ready to finish. But I held on to one thought, one that followed me everywhere. Something in that kitchen wasn't meant for him, and I had to find out what. A truth was waiting, but I wasn't ready for how far it would go. I moved closer, pretending to admire the morning sunlight sliding across the counter. Every instinct screamed at me to act, but what could I do? I was just a mother watching her son, a silent guardian in a house that didn't feel safe anymore. The bowls steamed quietly, each one promising a different outcome, though Silas couldn't know it. My heart pounded in my chest, and my hands trembled slightly, not from fear of her, but from fear of failing him. I realized in that moment that life could change in a single decision, a single movement, a split second. One wrong step and everything would be lost. And that's when it hit me: I had to act. I had to protect my son, even if he didn't understand why yet. Before I tell you what I did, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt powerless while someone you love unknowingly walked into danger? If you have, you know that the feeling stays with you long after the moment passes. Subscribe now or risk missing the story that could save someone you love. And with that, the quiet morning in Silas's kitchen became the starting point for a revelation that would change everything. The neighborhood looked like something from a magazine: tree-lined streets, mailboxes neatly aligned, lawns trimmed as if on cue. Every morning, joggers passed by with headphones in, waves exchanged politely between neighbors, and the faint hum of lawnmowers punctuated the calm. From the outside, everything was orderly, calm, and predictable. But I knew better. I've lived long enough to see the small cracks, the quiet tensions, even in the most perfect-looking places. In this cul-de-sac, people smiled and nodded, yet inside their homes, lives were far messier than the freshly painted doors suggested. Silas's house fit right in, white shutters, a welcoming front porch, wind chimes tinkling lightly in the breeze. Visitors would never suspect that inside, routine breakfasts were being carefully orchestrated. Not for love, not for care, but for something else entirely. Even on a sunny morning, I felt the weight of what was about to unfold. Something about that house made me watch closer, notice the small details that would soon save my son's life. Jolene was the kind of woman everyone thought of as a dream neighbor. She baked cookies for the local school fundraiser, hosted block parties with color-coded decorations, and volunteered at the community center like clockwork. People smiled when they spoke of her, whispered that she was a treasure, someone rare in this world of ordinary routines. Yet there were subtle cracks if you knew where to look. She never lingered too long in casual conversation. Her laughter always seemed rehearsed, her hands precise, her gaze occasionally lingering a beat too long on Silas while he sipped his coffee. She had mastered the art of being seen as selfless without actually giving herself away. To the neighbors, she was a saint. To me, she was a careful observer in her own right, watching Silas with a patience that didn't feel kind. And the kitchen, where she moved with grace and control, began to reveal the first whispers of a pattern I couldn't ignore. Silas was a man who built more than houses. He built dreams. Long hours at the architecture firm left him weary, yet he never complained. His hands carried the faint calluses of dedication, and his eyes, though tired, still held the spark of someone who believed in creating something lasting. He was gentle, thoughtful, and soft-spoken, a man whose patience had been tested quietly over 20 years of marriage. Yet even he didn't notice how his mornings had begun to lose their warmth. Each day, he would take the steaming bowl Jolene set in front of him, sip the juice she pressed fresh, and smile politely, unaware that the routine was becoming a trap disguised as care. I watched him, my son, my heart aching, as he moved through his days weighed down by an invisible heaviness. What the neighbors saw as an industrious, devoted husband was, in reality, a man slowly dimming under the influence of something I was only beginning to understand. I moved into the guest suite over the garage after my husband passed. The neighbors expected a quiet grandmother, the one who nodded and smiled, who stayed out of the way. But I've always been a watcher. My eyes catch the details others overlook, the flicker in a smile, the hesitation of a hand, the pause in a conversation that doesn't belong. Every morning at exactly 7 a.m., I watched Silas take his first bite, his posture tense, his expression faintly off. Jolene hovered, but never ate from the same bowl. She sipped her protein shake, eyes darting, hands slightly shaking. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet it screamed danger to me. A normal neighbor would call it habit. I called it a pattern, a warning. Sometimes I whispered under my breath just to break the rhythm of the quiet house. What is she really doing? These interruptions in the ordinary morning felt small, but they were clues. Clues I intended to follow, no matter how hidden they seemed. The kitchen was the heart of the house, but it felt different to me. Every pot and pan, every spoon and bowl, seemed to whisper secrets only I could hear. Jolene moved through the space like she owned not just the room, but the routine of Silas's life. I couldn't shake the feeling that each measured step, each carefully placed dish, was part of something I hadn't yet named. Neighbors would see a happy couple. They'd see Jolene smiling, bustling, offering coffee, muffins, and polite conversation. But the kitchen told a quieter story, one only someone paying attention could catch. The bowls, the way she served them, the way she watched Silas eat, it all felt orchestrated, though no one else would notice. I leaned against the counter, my hands wrapped around a mug, and I knew the true nature of her intentions would be revealed there. Not outside, not in the living room, not in polite small talk. The kitchen was where her halo started to crack. And when it did, everything we thought we knew about love, trust, and safety would be tested. It started small. Silas would forget the simplest things, where he left his keys, the name of a client he had just met, the details of a design meeting he had been preparing for weeks. He complained about brain fog, fatigue that set in even before his morning coffee, and a strange, constant heaviness in his chest. The doctors all nodded and wrote the same word, stress. One even suggested more rest, less work, maybe a short vacation. Silas, a man who had once run marathons for fun, struggled to climb the stairs without pausing to catch his breath. Yet even with these clear signs, Jolene insisted it was normal. "You're working too hard," she said, her tone soft, comforting, rehearsed. "You just need to take better care of yourself." Neighbors didn't notice. Friends didn't notice. But I did. I watched as my son's energy drained away day by day, his eyes losing some of their usual spark, his posture gradually shrinking. Something invisible was eroding him, yet no one in the world could see it, except me. And all the while, Jolene moved silently around him, always offering breakfast, always smiling, always watching. Jolene's attentiveness seemed perfect on the surface. She hovered at Silas's side with gentle reminders. "Did you take your vitamins? Make sure you finish your breakfast. You look tired, let me get you some juice." Every word was soft, every movement calculated to appear caring. To anyone else, she was the ideal partner, the devoted wife. But I had learned to read the spaces between words. I noticed the way her hands trembled slightly whenever she handed him his blue bowl. I noticed how she never touched the oats herself, only prepared them for him. Her protein shake, eaten elsewhere, was her armor against what she was administering silently. The neighbors saw a loving couple. I saw a woman rehearsing care as though it were a script. The kitchen wasn't a place of love. It was a stage, and Silas was the unwitting actor in a performance that had gone on for years. Even now, as I recall the small, almost imperceptible details, my stomach twists. I knew she was hiding something, but I couldn't yet prove it. Every smile, every step, every carefully served bowl was another question I had to answer before it was too late. I watched closely every morning, my eyes tracing the subtle choreography Jolene had perfected over years. She never ate from the same bowl she gave Silas. She sipped her shake, never touching his oats, never lifting the glass of juice he drained completely. Her gaze followed him like a shadow, sharp and calculating, yet practiced to look like care. It wasn't just the food. It was how she measured his. It wasn't just the food. It was how she measured his movements, how she waited for him to finish each bite before handing him the next spoon, how she lingered for a heartbeat longer whenever he reached for the juice. The tremor in her hands was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it told me she wasn't simply a devoted wife. She was someone who calculated every moment. I noticed the patterns no one else did, the way she double-checked the bowls, how she made sure he drank every last drop, how her own meal was always separate, always different. She was testing, observing, and controlling, though to Silas, it looked like routine care. Every time I saw him take a bite, I felt the tension tighten in my chest. I whispered under my breath, not for Jolene to hear, but to steady myself, "Why would a wife watch her husband eat so closely?" If this feels suspicious, subscribe. Don't ignore warning signs in your own life. The more I watched, the more I understood that something was happening in that kitchen that no doctor could diagnose. Every spoonful Silas consumed seemed to carry more than nutrition. There was weight to it, weight that only became clear in hindsight. I began keeping track in my mind. The timing, the rituals, the subtle pauses Jolene took before handing him his bowl. She never missed a beat, yet each beat felt like a step in a game only she knew how to play. Silas, my son, trusted her completely. He never suspected that the care he accepted might be the very thing making him sick. I stayed close but invisible, my presence unnoticed, my eyes always on the bowls, on Jolene's hands, on the faintest flicker in her expression. Something was hidden, and the answer was right there, waiting to be revealed, but I had to wait for the perfect moment. Subscribe now. Don't risk missing the signs that could save a life. The truth was coming, inch by inch, and it would strike faster than anyone expected. That Tuesday morning, everything seemed normal. The sun had barely risen. The air smelled faintly of dew and brewed coffee. Jolene moved with her usual precision, placing the blue ceramic bowl in front of Silas, a smile painted across her face. He sat down, rubbing his eyes, unaware that this breakfast would be different from all the others. Then I saw it, a tiny, crystalline residue clinging to the rim of the bowl. It didn't glimmer like sugar. It didn't sparkle like salt. It had the subtle, deadly glint of something that could change a life in minutes. Silas stood to answer a frantic work call, leaving the steaming bowl behind. Jolene, distracted by a text, ducked into the pantry to grab her purse. That 10-second window felt endless. My pulse thumped in my ears. My mind raced, thinking faster than my body could move. I knew in that instant that this was the moment that could alter everything. One careful decision, one quiet movement, and a truth hidden for years could finally be revealed. I didn't pause to think. Years of watching, years of instinct, all led to this one split second. My hands moved before my mind could protest. The blue bowl, with its deadly secret, was swapped for Jolene's identical white bowl of plain oats. My heart hammered against my ribs, a caged bird desperate to escape. Every muscle tensed, but I stayed still, watching from the doorway. I knew what would happen, yet I also knew it had to happen. Silas deserved a chance to wake up, to breathe, to see the world clearly again. I whispered a silent prayer, not for me, not for Jolene, but for him, for Silas. Every fiber of my being screamed that this small act could tip the balance between life and death. The room seemed to hold its breath. The kitchen, so ordinary every other morning, was now charged with anticipation. Every movement, every glance, every detail would matter. One mistake and we would all pay. And yet, the truth waited, like a shadow just beyond the light. Silas returned from his call, unaware of the change. He sat down and, without hesitation, began eating from the white bowl. I stayed in the shadows, barely breathing, watching the steam rise from the oats as if it carried a warning. Jolene came back, laughing softly at a text, and without looking, picked up the blue bowl, the very bowl meant for him. The smile never faltered, but the weight of what she had administered lingered like a storm about to break. Within minutes, the consequences revealed themselves. The mask Jolene wore so perfectly began to slip. A tremor ran through her hand, violent and unexpected. Her confident composure faltered as the room's air seemed to thicken with tension. I leaned against the doorway, my mind sharp and alert. The plan she had executed for years, the poison hidden under the guise of care, was now showing its true face. Silas, unaware, ate steadily, his usual fog lifting with every bite of clean oats. And in that moment, I realized, a single action, taken quietly and carefully, had shifted the balance. The truth, long hidden in the routine of morning breakfasts, was starting to emerge. That decision would break open a truth darker than any of us expected. Within 30 minutes of finishing the blue bowl, Jolene's composed mask shattered. Her hand began to tremble violently, knocking her spoon onto the tile. Her face drained of color, shifting to a muddy gray as panic crept into her eyes. "Silas," she gasped, voice shaking, body wavering. "Feel dizzy, my heart." Silas dropped his briefcase, rushing to her side, panic etched across his face. "Jolene? What's happening? Are you okay?" I remained in the doorway, my body tense but my mind sharp. I had seen this before, the way a body reacts when it has been forced to tolerate something over time, only for the system to reject it all at once. Her carefully constructed control over him had backfired. The poison, meant to weaken Silas over months, now surged through her veins, showing its effect in full. Every detail mattered. The timing, the doses, the way she never ate from the blue bowl herself. And now, she was paying the price of the game she had been orchestrating for years. I watched silently, heart pounding, knowing that what was about to unfold in the hospital would confirm what I already suspected, and what Silas needed to know for his own survival. Silas's eyes widened as he took in her shaking hands and pale face. Panic surged through him, a rush of adrenaline that made him stumble forward. "Jolene, talk to me. What's happening?" He tried to steady her, guiding her to the chair, supporting her weight. His mind raced, connecting the dots instinctively, but the shock clouded his clarity. Every second felt stretched, heavy with urgency. "I don't understand," he muttered, almost to himself. "She's never, the sudden." I could see him struggling to reconcile the woman he loved with the scene in front of him. His usual patience was now laced with fear, confusion, and protective instinct. For once, Silas was not the calm, collected architect. He was a son, a husband, a man confronting a crisis he could barely comprehend. Yet, even in his panic, he never questioned the routine he had followed for years. He didn't see that this collapse, this tremor, was the mirror of what had been quietly happening to him all along. I stayed still, my hands gripping my cane, heart pounding. I knew the truth, and it was about to hit him with the force of a revelation he could no longer ignore. While Silas panicked, I remained calm. Years of watching, of noticing the smallest inconsistencies, had trained me to separate fear from action. My pulse raced, yes, but my mind was clear. I understood what the blue bowl held, and what its absence meant for Silas. I watched Jolene's tremors, the way her face tightened, her breaths shallow and uneven. It was the effect of something she had administered countless times, now turned back on her without warning. And for the first time in years, Silas's usual fog wasn't clouding his eyes. The oats he had eaten from the white bowl gave him clarity, a return of energy, and a dawning awareness. I whispered quietly to myself, not for them to hear, but to steady the moment. This is why I watched. This is why I waited. I knew the doctors wouldn't find what they weren't expecting. They would see a reaction, perhaps an illness, but not the deliberate truth hidden in plain sight. Only we could recognize the pattern. Only we could act on it. And soon, that truth would reveal the full extent of the danger Jolene had posed. By the time the ambulance arrived, Jolene's strength had drained almost completely. Silas paced the waiting room, wringing his hands, his mind spinning in panic. Every second felt heavier than the last. He couldn't yet see the full picture, but he knew something was terribly wrong. I stayed close, observing, listening, calculating. I knew the doctors wouldn't recognize the cause. They would treat the symptoms, check her vitals, perhaps run standard tests, but the real danger remained invisible to them. That was why I had to be ready. As they wheeled Jolene past us, her trembling body supported by paramedics, my heart pounded with urgency. I whispered under my breath, "They won't see what's hidden, Silas. Only we know the truth." I kept my eyes on Silas as he followed, noticing the subtle shift in him. Even amidst fear, clarity began to settle in his gaze. The contrast between his clear-mindedness and her collapsing form was undeniable. And then, a question formed in my mind, a puzzle waiting to be solved. How long had she been doing this? The answer would not come immediately, but it would hit harder than any medicine or diagnosis could. While Silas paced the waiting room, my mind raced. I knew the doctors wouldn't suspect what I already had in my sights. Jolene's symptoms could look like anything: stress, exhaustion, a reaction to her protein shake. But I also knew the truth. Something she had been giving Silas for years was finally backfiring. I approached Dr. Vance, a young, competent physician, and lowered my voice. "Doctor, my daughter-in-law has been very particular about her supplements," I said carefully. "You might consider a comprehensive toxicology screen, specifically for Digitalis or other heavy heart medications. She's been self-medicating for her nerves." The doctor paused, eyebrow raised. "Digitalis? That's a prescription drug for heart conditions. Why would she?" I let the question hang, leaving him to connect the dots. "I'm not sure," I replied softly, my hands gripping my cane. "But I've seen unusual reactions before. It's better to be safe." 2 hours later, the results would confirm my suspicions. The seed had been planted. Jolene's careful facade, her years of care, had finally been exposed, even if she didn't know it yet. 2 hours later, Dr. Vance returned, this time with an intensity that made my spine straighten. Silas, still pacing, stopped mid-step as the doctor spoke. "Mr. Sterling, we found an unusually high concentration of a prescription-strength heart medication in your wife's system," Dr. Vance said, handing over the results. "Digitalis. It's used to slow the heart rate in patients with cardiac issues, but in a healthy person, it can cause confusion, lethargy, and even cardiac arrest." Silas froze, 1,000 thoughts flashing across his face. "But she doesn't have a heart condition. I'm the one." His voice cracked, disbelief spreading. I stayed in the background, watching as the truth began to dawn. Every morning, every blue bowl, every time Jolene insisted he finish every drop, came rushing back to him in a single, chilling realization. Then a man in a suit appeared, hospital security, followed by a police liaison. The tone of the room shifted instantly from medical concern to legal urgency. Silas's gaze met mine, eyes wide with horror and understanding. The pattern he had ignored for months, the illness no one could diagnose, now revealed its cruel design. Jolene had been poisoning him. Silas sat heavily in the waiting room chair, trembling as the realization sank in. The fog he had battled for months, the fatigue, the near-fainting spells, it had never been stress, never been age. It had been deliberate, hidden within the meals he trusted most. He ran a hand through his hair, his eyes scanning the sterile hospital walls as memories of countless mornings flashed before him. Each blue bowl, each glass of juice, every careful word Jolene had spoken, they weren't signs of love. They were instruments of control, instruments of harm. I reached for his hand, gripping it firmly. "Silas," I whispered, voice steady. "You were the target, not the victim of coincidence. She wanted to weaken you, and she had been doing it for years." He swallowed hard, eyes wide. "All this time, she was poisoning me?" "Yes," I said softly, my heart aching for him. "And now, the truth is in front of you." Every subtle tremor she showed, every carefully measured action, it was never about care, It was about power and control. His face went from shock to cold clarity. The man who had been silenced by fog and weakness now stood at the edge of comprehension. For the first time in months, he could see the danger in full detail. By the time Silas processed the revelation, Jolene's condition had taken a turn for the worse. The ICU monitors beeped sharply, tracking the irregular rhythm of her heart. Her breaths came short and shallow, a stark contrast to the composed woman she had been just hours before. Silas gripped my hand tighter, his knuckles white. He had always been calm under pressure, but now the weight of betrayal pressed heavily upon him. She wanted me gone, he whispered, voice tight. I nodded, my gaze never leaving Jolene's frail form. Every symptom, every trembling movement, was the mirror of the months he had endured unknowingly. The doctors moved with efficiency, yet the tension in the room was undeniable. They treated the surface, monitored the vitals, but they hadn't yet uncovered the root of the crisis. That knowledge rested solely with us. I leaned closer to Silas and whispered, my voice low, laced with warning and reassurance, "This is only the beginning. What she did to you, it could have ended you. And it's a truth most people will never see coming." The room seemed to hold its breath as he absorbed the full magnitude of what had been hidden in plain sight for years. As Silas absorbed the shock, I turned slightly toward the camera of our story, because, truly, some truths are too important to stay silent. Was she evil or desperate? I asked softly, letting the weight of the question settle. Comment below, and don't just watch silently. Share your thoughts. Would you have noticed the signs before it was too late? And for those who hesitate, who might not subscribe, I added quietly but firmly, subscribe to stay ahead of stories like this, or tell us in the comments why you won't. Sometimes, missing a warning could cost more than just time. It wasn't just engagement, it was a reminder, vigilance matters. Awareness matters. And sometimes, knowing early can save a life. Amid the chaos at the hospital, Silas's coat lay draped over a chair. A faint vibration drew my attention. He picked it up, and there it was, a phone that wasn't his. Jolene must have left it in the pocket in the confusion of the ambulance ride. Curiosity, tinged with dread, made him open the screen. A single message appeared from a contact saved as landscaper. Silas's eyes narrowed as he read the words. Is the old man sluggish enough yet? The realtor is coming by the lake house tomorrow to sign the for sale papers. Once he's out of the picture, the insurance payout covers the debt and we're clear. His hand shook slightly as he read it again, this time aloud to me. The words hit like ice water, his life, the house, the deception, all revealed in a single notification. I watched my son, the man who had been a victim for so long, process the message. The confusion in his eyes shifted to a sharp clarity. He now understood the full depth of Jolene's plan, and that Marcus, the landscaper, was no gardener, but a predator circling for the payoff. Silas reread the message, each word sinking in with increasing clarity. The old man, sluggish enough, the realtor, insurance payout. He muttered fragments, connecting the pieces like an architect visualizing a building. The plan was audacious, cruel, and precise. Jolene wasn't just careless. She had orchestrated a scenario where Silas's very life would be sacrificed to secure a lake house and cash. And Marcus, the supposed landscaper, was the accomplice ready to execute the final act. I leaned close, whispering, "This is the proof, Silas. The betrayal isn't hidden anymore. It's right here in black and white." Silas's hands tightened around the phone, knuckles white. So, she wasn't just poisoning me, she was preparing the endgame, he said, voice low but resolute. And Marcus, he thinks he's getting a payday. The reality hit like a thunderclap. Every morning of fog, every missed meeting, every unexplained weakness, it had been a rehearsal for a crime. But now, with a message in his hands, the predator and the plot were fully exposed. I watched him transform in those moments, from a man who had endured months of subtle harm to a strategist ready to reclaim control. The balance had shifted. Silas sat back, phone in hand, piecing together the full picture. Every morning Jolene's care had masked a deliberate plan. The blue bowl, the juice, the selective meals, it was all calculated to weaken him, to keep him compliant while she and Marcus maneuvered for the lake house and the insurance payout. I watched my son's expression shift, panic giving way to focus. His fingers tapped the phone as if plotting the next move. This was no longer about survival. It was about strategy, about taking back control from the people who had betrayed him the most. He whispered, almost to himself, every tremor, every kind gesture, it was practice. She was rehearsing how to finish the job. I placed a hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Now you know the truth, I said. And now, you can decide how to respond. This is the moment you reclaim what was nearly taken from you. Silas exhaled slowly, a grim determination settling in his eyes. The man who had been a victim for months was now becoming the architect of justice. And as his mother, I felt the weight of pride and relief. He would no longer be passive, and the predators who had hidden behind smiles would soon learn that underestimating him had been their first mistake. The basement office smelled faintly of old paper and dust. Silas's hands trembled slightly as he approached the locked filing cabinet, the one Jolene had always claimed was for tax privacy. "Mom, do you think it's okay to look inside?" he whispered, hesitation in his voice. I shook my head gently. "Silas, the truth isn't going to find itself. You need to see this." I spotted a hollowed-out gardening book on the shelf and pulled it down. Hidden within its pages was a small key. My pulse quickened as I handed it to him. He inserted it into the lock, the mechanism clicking with a sound that echoed in the quiet basement. The cabinet door creaked open, revealing folders stacked neatly, yet filled with secrets. Every folder, every envelope, seemed normal at first glance. But I could feel the tension in the air, the kind that only comes when the ordinary hides the extraordinary. Silas's eyes scanned the first few folders, bills, schedules, community event pamphlets, then stopped. His hand froze on a thick folder labeled simply, "Insurance." I whispered, "This is it, Silas. Whatever's in there, it's why you've been sick." He slowly pulled it out, the papers inside hinting at a story far more calculated than either of us had imagined. The quiet basement seemed suddenly charged, the weight of betrayal pressing down as the pieces of the puzzle began to reveal themselves. Silas flipped through the folder slowly, each page revealing more than we had expected. Bills, statements, and receipts scattered across the cabinet, but then a document caught his eye. He pulled it out carefully. "Look at this." The paper was an insurance policy, one Silas had never signed, or at least he thought he hadn't. But the signature at the bottom was perfect. His own handwriting, replicated flawlessly. The policy was recent, dated a day after one of his fainting spells. And the clause? Accidental death, with a payout of $2 million. His pulse quickened as he realized the plan's true scope. Jolene had been preparing for the day he would be removed from the picture entirely, financially and physically. I leaned closer, whispering softly, "This isn't a mistake, Silas. It's deliberate. She forged your signature to secure the insurance before the house could even be sold." He ran a hand through his hair, eyes wide with disbelief and growing anger. All this, every morning, every meal, it wasn't just to control me, it was practice for this. I nodded grimly. Exactly. She's rehearsing the consequences for someone else's gain. And Marcus? he's waiting to benefit from every ounce of it. The weight of betrayal settled heavily between us. For the first time, the quiet basement office became a war room, a place where strategy had to replace shock. Silas opened another folder, this one thicker, heavier, and filled with photographs. At first, they seemed harmless. Him jogging in the park, walking his dog, picking up groceries. But as he flipped through, the details became chilling. These are from different days, different times, he murmured, his voice tight. Someone has been following me. I peered over his shoulder. The images weren't just casual snapshots. They captured him in vulnerable moments, slumping in his chair, yawning mid-meeting, struggling up the stairs. Someone had documented every lapse, every weak moment. Marcus. The so-called landscaper. The accomplice. The predator lurking in plain sight. Silas's hands tightened around the edges of the photos. All this, she's not just planning insurance. She's ensuring I never notice until it's too late. I placed my hand on his shoulder, steadying him. Exactly. Every detail, every image, every tremor in her hands, it was a rehearsal. The whole thing was designed to make him, us, vulnerable, predictable, manageable. His eyes burned with a new kind of focus, the fog replaced by strategy. No longer the unsuspecting victim, Silas began connecting the dots, realizing how meticulous and dangerous the duo had been. The room felt heavy with tension, the weight of evidence pressing down, yet for the first time, clarity replaced confusion. We were no longer in the dark. Behind the spice rack in the kitchen, hidden among jars of cinnamon and oregano, was a small, unlabeled tin. My heart skipped a beat as I carefully opened it. Inside lay a fine, white powder, odorless, invisible to the untrained eye. Digitalis, I whispered, more to myself than to Silas. Derived from foxglove. In controlled doses, it can help the heart. In the wrong hands, it mimics heart failure, exactly what she fed you every morning. Silas's eyes widened as he understood. The blue bowl, the glass of juice, the careful portions. It had all been calculated to weaken him gradually, to mimic the symptoms of illness, all without detection. He picked up the tin, turning it over in his hands. So every fainting spell, every doctor visit, every accusation of stress, it was her plan, he said, voice tight. I nodded solemnly. Yes. And because you were building tolerance unknowingly, she thought you'd never notice. But now, she's the one in danger, if she keeps going. The weight of it pressed down in the small kitchen. The quiet hum of the refrigerator seemed almost accusatory, as though the house itself bore witness to years of deception. For the first time, the strategy, the poison, the rehearsals, they all converged into a single, undeniable truth. Silas exhaled slowly, eyes locked on the tin. She wasn't just controlling me, she was rehearsing. And now the game is ours to play. Silas stood in the kitchen, the tin of Digitalis in one hand, the folder of forged insurance papers in the other. His jaw tightened, eyes scanning the room, every detail of Jolene's deception laid bare before him. I leaned on my cane, voice low but steady. She wasn't just killing you, she was rehearsing. The words hung in the air like a warning. Every tremor Jolene had shown, every carefully measured act of care, had been part of a plan. And now, with the evidence in our hands, the balance of power had shifted. Silas's expression hardened. For months, he had been passive, drifting through the fog she had manufactured. But the clarity of this moment sparked something new, strategy, anticipation, and resolve. He no longer felt like a victim. He was ready to reclaim control, to turn the predator's own game against her. I watched silently, pride mixed with a twinge of fear. The next moves would be critical. One misstep, one hesitation, and years of preparation could collapse. And as Silas placed the folder and the tin back on the counter, his voice cut through the tension like steel. "We've got everything we need. Now, it's time to make them pay for underestimating me." Silas sat at the kitchen table, phone in hand, a quiet intensity in his eyes. Every fiber of his being was focused, the fog that had clouded him for months replaced by clarity. He wasn't just planning a reaction. He was crafting a strategy that would expose both Jolene and Marcus. He opened the messaging app, fingers poised above the keyboard. Each word mattered. This message had to bait them perfectly without raising suspicion. He typed carefully, mimicking Jolene's tone. "The old man is suspicious. The hospital found the meds. I told them I took them by mistake. We need to move the money from the joint account to the offshore one tonight. Meet me at the lake house at midnight. I'm slipping out of the hospital." He paused, rereading it. The plan was simple yet brilliant. Marcus would arrive expecting to collect a fortune, and Jolene would arrive believing her scheme was still on track. Both would be caught off guard by the man they thought was weak and unsuspecting. I watched him, heart swelling with pride and fear. "This is it, Silas. The moment you turn the tables," I whispered. A slow, determined smile crossed his face. For the first time in months, he wasn't a victim, he was the architect. Silas picked up his laptop and logged into the bank account Jolene had assumed she could access at will. Every joint transaction she had planned, every expectation of transferring funds to an offshore account, would crumble within minutes. He navigated the interface with precision, activating security measures, freezing all outgoing transfers, and flagging any suspicious activity. The funds Marcus had anticipated would never leave the account. Not tonight. Not ever. "This is how we level the field," Silas murmured, a quiet fury in his voice. "They think they control everything, but the truth is mine to command." I watched, impressed by his transformation. Months of manipulation and poisoning had been endured, but now every calculated action Jolene had taken could be undone. And the predators would learn that control was an illusion when the target refused to remain passive. He leaned back, letting out a slow breath. "They're expecting an easy payday. They're walking into a trap of their own making," he said, his gaze fixed on the screen. In that moment, the kitchen, once the site of his subjugation, became a command center. Silas wasn't just reacting, he was shaping events, ensuring the predators who underestimated him would soon confront the consequences of their greed. Silas picked up the phone again, this time dialing the local sheriff's office. Calm and deliberate, he explained the situation without revealing unnecessary details. "There's a planned meet at the lake house tonight. 2 individuals may attempt fraud and endanger my safety. Please have deputies discreetly monitor the property." I watched as his voice carried authority, the same voice that once hesitated under Jolene's manipulation now commanding attention. Every word was calculated, every pause deliberate. He hung up, his gaze fixed on me. "They'll be there, Ma, but not for what they expect." I nodded, proud yet anxious. The thought of both Jolene and Marcus walking unknowingly into a trap tightened the tension in my chest. For months, Silas had endured, but tonight, the balance would shift. Every element, the frozen bank account, the fake message, the authorities in position, was part of a single orchestrated plan to ensure that justice, not chance, would prevail. Silas exhaled, a grim smile crossing his face. "This is where it ends, Mum. We've set the stage, and now they'll face the consequences of underestimating the man they tried to manipulate." The quiet of the kitchen contrasted sharply with the storm about to unfold at the lake house. Every move from this point on would be critical. Silas sank into a chair, rubbing his temples briefly before looking up at me. I can't believe how far they went. Every meal, every morning, every smile, it was all calculated to weaken me. I placed my hand over his, steadying him. You endured months of deception, Silas, but now you see clearly. And that clarity is your greatest weapon. He exhaled slowly, the weight of betrayal evident, yet tempered by resolve. It's hard, turning their own game against them. I want them to pay, but I don't want to lose myself in anger. You won't, I assured him. You're not seeking revenge for the sake of it. You're reclaiming what's rightfully yours. And we do it smartly. That's what predators never expect. He nodded, eyes hardening with purpose. Tonight, it all changes. They think they're in control. They think I'm the same man they've been poisoning. But I'm not. I've waited for this moment. I smiled, pride and relief washing over me. Then we move forward together. Every step carefully, every action intentional. You're not just surviving this, Silas, you're rewriting the ending. The kitchen felt alive with tension and determination. In that space, the architect of justice was born. Not in anger, not in haste, but in clarity and strategy. I leaned close, speaking directly to the unseen audience. Join us. Subscribe before the next twist catches you off guard. Stories like this aren't just entertainment, they're warnings. The danger isn't always obvious, and hesitation could cost more than you think. I paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. And for those who won't subscribe, leave a comment. Tell us why you're risking missing the truth. The air around the lake house was thick with humidity, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Silas and I crouched in the shadows, hidden behind a thick brush that overlooked the gravel driveway. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call, made my pulse quicken. Silas's eyes were sharp, calculating every movement. The lake reflected faint moonlight, shimmering across the water, making the isolation of the house all the more apparent. Every sound, the crunch of gravel beneath Marcus's shoes, the distant croak of frogs, was magnified in the tense silence. I placed a hand on his shoulder. Remember, patience. Let them believe they're in control. Every misstep will bring the truth closer to light. Marcus disappeared behind the front door, confident and unaware of the traps silently closing around him. The stage was set. Every piece of the plan, from frozen accounts to police monitoring, was in place. The predators, blinded by greed and arrogance, had no idea the architect was already inside their game. A taxi pulled up silently behind Marcus's truck. Jolene stepped out, frail but determined, her eyes scanning the lake house with an urgency that betrayed her greed. She had left the hospital against medical advice, believing her carefully orchestrated plan was still in motion. She thinks she's still in control, I murmured to Silas. He narrowed his eyes, watching her move across the gravel, clutching a small bag tightly. The headlights from Marcus's truck and the moonlight reflected off her tense posture, revealing a woman on edge, one whose confidence had begun to crack. Jolene paused at the door, glancing nervously at Marcus. "Everything's ready, right?" she demanded, her voice a mixture of command and desperation. Marcus nodded, a smug grin on his face. "Yeah, we're set. Tonight's the night." I saw Silas's jaw tighten. They think this is the culmination. They don't realize it's the beginning of their reckoning, I whispered. Jolene's steps faltered slightly as she sensed the emptiness, the unnatural quiet around the property. The anticipation of the confrontation hung thickly, the air electric with the weight of betrayal and deceit. Silas's hand brushed mine, and I felt the shift in him, a transformation from passive victim to calculating strategist. The lake house, once a symbol of stolen ambition and greed, had become the stage for the predators to finally face the consequences of underestimating the man they tried to manipulate. Inside the lake house, tension erupted instantly. Jolene's voice, sharp and demanding, cut through the still night. "Where is it? Marcus?" The transfer didn't go through. You promised it would be done by midnight. Marcus threw up his hands, frustration clear in every movement. I told you. The account's frozen. What do you want me to do? I followed the instructions you gave. Jolene's face turned pale with a mixture of fear and anger. No, this can't be happening. I told you everything was on track. We've been planning this for months. I watched Silas from across the property, heart hammering. The police wire we had set up captured every word, every crack in their confidence. The smugness that had filled the room when they arrived was evaporating, replaced by panic and blame. Relax, Marcus hissed, leaning closer to Jolene. We can fix this, there's still tonight. Just stay calm. But Jolene's hands trembled as she waved them in frustration. Fix this? He's onto us. He's smarter than we ever thought. Silas, hidden in the shadows with the deputies ready, allowed a small, satisfied smile. The predators believed they were in control, yet every argument, every shout, every plea for reassurance was playing directly into his hands. I whispered to Silas, pride and tension in my voice. They're revealing themselves. Every crack, every panic. This is their undoing. The argument escalated, voices overlapping, each word a confession of greed and underestimation. In that lake house, the illusion of power dissolved, and the architect of justice watched patiently, ready to strike at the precise moment. Silas pressed the switch on the small control panel he had set up near the treeline. Instantly, the entire front yard of the lake house was bathed in harsh, clinical white light. Every shadow that had concealed his presence vanished. Marcus froze, the smugness drained from his face. Jolene stumbled backward, shielding her eyes from the sudden brilliance. The illusion of control shattered instantly. I switched the lights, Silas whispered, voice calm but commanding. They won't see me, but they'll see everything they're about to lose. From the darkness, we watched as panic replaced confidence. Marcus's hands trembled slightly, and Jolene's composure faltered completely. Their carefully laid plans, built on the assumption of secrecy, were unraveling in front of them. Silas stepped forward, emerging from the shadows. He wasn't shouting, he wasn't angry. His presence alone, tall and resolute, was enough to assert dominance. You thought I was passive. You thought I was weak. You were wrong, he said, voice steady and precise. I could see the fear ripple through them, subtle but unmistakable. Every lie, every act of manipulation, every attempt at control had been calculated for someone who would never notice. Now, the predators were the ones caught off guard. The lake house, illuminated in full, became a stage for reckoning. Silas, the architect of his own justice, stood ready to expose the truth. The trap was sprung, and the consequences of underestimating him would soon be unavoidable. The silence was deafening for only a moment before the deputies stepped from their concealed positions behind the trees. Their presence, calm yet authoritative, left Marcus frozen in place. Jolene sank to her knees, panic overtaking every shred of composure she had tried to maintain. You're both under arrest, one deputy stated clearly, handcuffs at the ready. Marcus lunged for his truck door in a futile attempt to escape, but two officers were faster. Within seconds, his hands were secured, and the weight of reality settled on him. Jolene's face contorted with desperation as she scrambled to stand. Silas! Honey! You don't understand. Silas didn't move. He didn't raise his voice. He held the blue ceramic bowl he had brought from the kitchen, letting it symbolize every act of betrayal she had orchestrated over the past months. I stepped forward, leaning on my cane, my voice low but unwavering. A good wife feeds the soul, Jolene. You fed poison instead. Her hands trembled as she reached out towards Silas, pleading, begging for a reprieve she didn't deserve. I've been good. I've been loyal. Loyalty isn't measured in deceit and danger, I whispered, letting every word sink into the heavy night. You wanted control, but tonight, control leaves you empty-handed. You wanted to harm him. Now, the law will decide your fate. The deputies led them away, their crimes laid bare. Silas finally exhaled, the tension leaving his shoulders slowly, and the blue bowl in his hand became a silent emblem of justice reclaimed. Jolene's knees hit the dirt as the weight of the situation fully sank in. Her face was pale, eyes wide, pleading. I approached slowly, cane in hand, each step deliberate. A good wife feeds the soul, Jolene, I said softly, letting the words strike where they would. You were a parasite, feeding on someone too kind to recognize your intentions. She looked up at me, desperation dripping from every word. Evelyn, I was trying. I only wanted security, stability. I shook my head, leaning closer. Security at the expense of another's life is not security, it's a cage of your own making. You poured poison into the life of the man who loved you, thinking it would remain hidden. But truth doesn't stay buried. Jolene's voice wavered as she whispered, Silas? I love him. You never loved him, I said, voice calm, firm, cutting through the last shred of denial. Love doesn't manipulate, it doesn't deceive, it doesn't plan a life-ending betrayal in a breakfast bowl. What you call love is greed, Jolene, and tonight, you're learning the cost of that greed. Silas stood silently behind me, watching. The predator's illusion of control had been shattered, and the architect of justice was finally revealed. For a long moment, Jolene simply trembled, the gravity of her choices pressing down. The lake house, once a symbol of ambition and betrayal, now held the undeniable truth. The careful, quiet observer had become the voice of reckoning. The first light of dawn stretched across the lake house as the authorities went through every inch of the property. Digitalis was recovered from Jolene's purse, still faintly crystalline, a silent testament to the mornings she had weaponized. The forged life insurance documents were found in Marcus's truck, the signatures a cruel imitation of Silas's hand. Silas watched silently, absorbing every detail. Months of confusion, fear, and slow poisoning had led to this moment of undeniable truth. Jolene and Marcus were no longer threats. They were evidence of the consequences of greed and betrayal. I could see it in his posture, the shift from tension to relief as the weight of uncertainty lifted. The authorities confirmed what we already knew. The scheme was real, the danger was intentional, and the predators were caught in the act. Every detail matters, I murmured, voice low but steady. They thought they could manipulate life itself, but justice doesn't miss the signs. Silas nodded, a deep exhale escaping him. We've survived, we've reclaimed control. And no one else will fall victim to their greed while we're paying attention. The first rays of sunlight reflected off the water, glinting faintly as if acknowledging the restored order. In that quiet moment, it became clear, truth, when recognized and acted upon, is a force no deception can withstand. Silas walked to the edge of the pier, holding the blue ceramic bowl that had once symbolized betrayal and danger. Its surface gleamed in the morning sun, a quiet reminder of the months of manipulation and hidden harm. He paused, inhaling deeply, as if taking a final measure of the fear and confusion that had filled their lives. Then, with steady hands, he tossed the bowl into the center of the lake. It arced gracefully, breaking the water with a soft splash before sinking beneath the rippling surface. I watched alongside him, knowing this simple act carried far more weight than it seemed. The blue bowl was gone, but the lessons remained. It was a symbol of reclaimed control, of truth prevailing over deception, and of the strength that comes from vigilance. Silas turned to me, a genuine smile lighting his features for the first time in years. It's finally over, Mom. We can rebuild, for real this time. The lake's water settled into a calm, reflective surface, mirroring the clarity and peace that had returned to our lives. That bowl, once a vessel of harm, had now become a symbol of justice served and life reclaimed. I stepped closer, placing my hand gently over Silas's. You've endured so much, my boy. But look at you now. You faced deception, fear, and betrayal, and you came out stronger. He leaned into my hand, relief and exhaustion mingling on his face. I couldn't have done this without you, Mom. You saw what I couldn't see, acted when I hesitated, and gave me the clarity I needed. I smiled softly, feeling a warmth that had been absent for too long. That's what family does, Silas. We watch, we guide, and sometimes we intervene. But the strength comes from you, the one who never gave up. We sat on the pier together, the morning light warming our faces. The lake, calm and silent now, reflected a sense of peace and closure. 4 months, fear had dominated our lives, but now it had been replaced by understanding and resolve. Silas exhaled, a weight visibly lifted from his shoulders. Now we can truly move forward. No lies, no threats, just life as it should be. I nodded, pride swelling in my chest. And we'll do it carefully, Silas. Step by step, truth by truth. That's the only way to ensure it lasts. Silas stood and stretched, sunlight glinting off the lake behind him. Tomorrow, breakfast will taste different, he said, a quiet chuckle escaping him. I smiled knowingly. Yes, Silas. Breakfast will taste like truth, honesty, and life reclaimed. No more fear, no more poison, just the nourishment of clarity and safety. He nodded, eyes reflecting the calm waters before us. The blue bowl, now sunk in the lake, had become more than ceramic. It was a symbol, a reminder that deception can be confronted, that vigilance and action can turn the tables on those who intend harm. We shared a moment of quiet laughter, a gentle peace settling over us. Months of tension and uncertainty had culminated in a simple, profound realization. The smallest acts, swapping a bowl, asking questions, staying alert, can be the difference between life and harm. I leaned on my cane, looking out at the lake. Silas, we've learned a vital truth. The world doesn't warn you, you must watch, you must act. And when you do, justice can be served without malice. He picked up a small breakfast plate from the pier, and together, we sat in silence, savoring not just food, but the victory of truth and survival. As we sat by the lake, I looked into the camera, or rather, into the hearts of those listening. Stay alert. Stay wise. Life doesn't always warn you when danger is near. Subscribe so you never miss a warning sign, and for those who won't, leave a comment. Tell us why you'd risk missing the truth.